In this project, we will be creating an RTS real-time strategy game. We will be playing as a controller for our entire civilization. We will give the player the ability to control where ships go by either clicking on them individually or creating a selecting box around the specific ones we want to control. We will have two types of ships to control, which are the workers and the units. Workers will be responsible for collecting resources and building buildings. Units will be responsible for defending or attacking enemies. Some of the buildings we will be able to create are new town centers, which are able to create new workers, houses, farms, towers, and then also other buildings that create different unit types. Once the player has a big enough army and defensive at the home base, the player can attack the enemy and win the game. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, in this section, we're going to go over all the planning for our RTS game. We're going to start off and view the entire outlined plan. Then we're going to go ahead and understand what we are making. Then after that, we're going to see all the expected functions for the game's mechanics. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, everything here is going to consist of the current plan we have for our RTS game. It's going to consist of three main sections. The middle section here is going to represent our main screen. This is exactly what the player is going to be viewing when playing the game. On the right side, this is going to consist of the in-game world. And on the left side, this is going to consist of the unit interactions. Let's start off with the middle one here. This blue area here is going to represent the main screen. This is exactly where you are in the current game and what you're looking at. We're also going to have some UI on the top and also on the bottom. This top UI right here is going to consist of all the labels we currently have for our resources and population count. The resources will consist of wood count, food count, and gold count. Our population one will have the current population count and also the max amount of population you can currently have, depending on how many buildings you have that allow more population. If you make your way down to the lower UI, we're going to have two different things. The mini map on the right, which tells you exactly where you are in the main map. And then we're also going to have all the interactive buttons on the left. We're going to have a couple different types of interactive buttons, such as if you have a worker selected, it will show you all the different buildings you can create. You will then go ahead, select a building, drag and drop it into exactly where you want it in the main world. You will also have different buttons for if you have a current building selected, and you can interact with it, of course, if it allows you to, such as removing it with a remove button, but you can also create more units with certain buildings as well, which you will have a button for there, and it will also populate with different items in the queue currently. All right, awesome. So that's going to be everything in the main screen section. Now in the in-game world, we're going to have a couple things. Starting off with the world itself is just a giant grid, and it's going to have numerous items on the grid. We're going to have things such as buildings, farms, trees, and gold. Now the trees and gold are resources that are placed. We can't walk through them, of course, but you can have workers go ahead and start working on them, and once their resource is out, they will disappear and turn into a navigation block, such as another blue one. For the buildings, some will automatically be in the in-game world on start, but of course some other ones will have to be built with a worker. Then we're also going to have farms. Farms are kind of like a combination of a navigation one and also a building. We will have to build farms, but we will also be able to walk through them as well. They will be taken away once their resource is out, just like the trees and the gold. So that's going to be everything for the in-game world. All the way on the left, for our unit interactions, we're going to have a couple different things. Now, as mentioned before, our worker units are able to build new buildings. So once those buildings are placed and they're able to be built, we can send our workers to start building them. Once the building is created, then we can start interacting with it. Workers will also have the responsibility to collect resources such as trees, gold, and farms. What we will do is highlight and select our current worker we want, and then have them go to that specific resource. Once that resource is out and it no longer exists, they will go to the next closest resource if it does exist. Workers will also be able to attack, but they will not be very good at it. For attacking purposes, we will primarily want to use units. Units will have stronger health, stronger attack, and even stronger range depending on their type. Now when we are selecting units or workers, we will be highlighting them, such as like this, and anything inside of our highlighted box will then become selected, and then we can tell them where to go. So then we can select a tree, an unbuilt building, or even an enemy to attack. So everything here will be what makes up our RTS game. Now let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. Alright, in this first section, we're going to go ahead and set up everything we need for our RTS game. We're going to start off by creating a new project in Godot. Then we're going to go ahead and navigate to a website where we can download all the free assets we're going to be using for this game. After that, we're going to go ahead and import those assets into our new game's art folder. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, let's go ahead and create our new project folder for our RTS game. So in our Godot Project Manager, we're going to go to the top left Create button right here. Go ahead and select that. Once it opens up, let's give it a name. We're going to call this My RTS Game. Make sure the path is correct for you. I'm just going to leave mine as is right here. And then everything else you can leave as is as well. Once you have that down, go ahead and hit Create and Edit. Alright, once your project opens up, go ahead and select the 2D view on the top right over here. Perfect. Alright, next thing we're going to do is create a new folder under our rest folder here on the bottom left. Let's go ahead and right click on it. Go to Create New. Go to Folder. Let's call this Art, because this is where we're going to hold all of our art assets. Awesome. Alright, save what you got so far. Control S. There you go. Alright, next thing we're going to do is download all the art assets we're going to be using for this game. Now I found two really good ones that are completely free to download right now. I shared the link in the description, so there should be two links for the art. There's going to be one that's going to be called the Space Shooter Redux. It's at Kenny's site, which has loads of free assets you can use. There's tons of other ones you can check out as well. This one here is going to have all the spaceships we're going to be using for the game. So go ahead, scroll on down, select that download button, and start downloading it. Once this one is done, then go ahead and navigate to the other one. It's also going to be at the Kenny site. This one's going to be called Sci-Fi RTS. Now this one's going to have a bunch of stuff for the nature, such as all the ground sprites, tree sprites, and just a bunch of other cool stuff we're going to be using in the game. So again, download this as well, and then you should be set. Alright, once both your downloads have completed, open up your File Explorer page, go to the Download section of your computer, then you should have two .zips here. Now before we drag and drop these into our game, we need to extract all their contents. So go ahead, select each one, right click, extract all. Do the same thing for the one below it as well. This process might take a second or two, so let that load. Once it's done loading though, you should have two different folders here without the .zip. Now these two are the ones we want to drag and drop into our game. So go ahead, highlight each one, and just simply drag and drop them into our art folder. Let that load. That might take a second or two because these are pretty big folders. Once it's done, we'll verify that it's actually there. Now sometimes when you drag and drop things into here, it doesn't actually go into the folder, so you might need to go ahead and select it and simply drag and drop it into our art folder again. Let that load. That's one. Let's do the other one now. Select the one below. Simply drag and drop into the art folder. Might take a second or two. Awesome. Let's go ahead, open it up. And there we go. Perfect. Awesome. Control S to save. So far, so good. Alright, in this section, we're going to create the main scene. We're going to start off by adding a couple nodes to our scene, such as a node for the main node, the UI, the game objects, and the camera. Then we're going to go ahead and set all the correct project settings. Last but not least, we're going to test and ensure things are working correctly. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our main node. So we can go ahead and just select the 2D scene right over here. Perfect. Let's rename it. I'm going to call it capital M, main. Perfect. Alright, inside our main node, we are going to add the other ones now. So let's right click, add child node. We're going to add another node 2D. This one's going to be called game objects. Awesome. We're also going to go ahead and we're going to create a canvas layer. We are going to rename this one UI. Perfect. We're also going to go ahead and add our camera 2D. Let's go ahead and add that as well. Our camera 2D, we're going to reposition it into the center of the screen. So let's go ahead and use that move tool. Simply drag it over. Make sure it is relatively perfect. It doesn't have to be exact because, of course, whenever we start the game, it'll always match it up with what we want. Which I'm going to do right about there. Maybe a little bit lower. There we go. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Looking good. Let's save those changes. Control S. It might ask you to set this as the current scene, so go ahead and do that as well. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to go into Project Settings. Then we're going to go ahead, type in W for Window, select Window, scroll all the way down, and go ahead and find the Stretch mode. Change that from Disabled to Canvas Items. Close that, save it again, hit play, select Current Scene, let that load, and there we go. And if we go ahead and increase or decrease the size of the screen, we should have a nice little black background that keeps and makes sure the screen is the same size. All right, awesome. All right, save what you got. Looking good so far. All right, in this section, we are going to create the UI scene. We are going to start off creating all the UI backgrounds, text labels, and win-lose screen. Then we're going to go ahead and create a mini map box that's going to help us navigate on the map. Then we're going to go ahead and create our worker build options. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started on this UI. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, select our UI here. We're going to add a couple things inside of it. So let's right click, add child node. All right, we are going to add a node 2D. Let's rename this node 2D backgrounds. There we go. All right, in backgrounds, we're going to go ahead, select it. We're going to go ahead, right click on there, add child node. We're going to add some colorX, which will give it a nice little background for some of the parts. So this first one here, let's go ahead and take this and just stretch it out all the way. Just make sure it is connected there. Perfect. You can make it a little smaller if you want to. This is kind of just going to be the banner on the top. Awesome. Let's do something like that. And maybe make it a little thinner. Perfect. Let's change the color to black. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead, select that colorect. Let's Control D to duplicate it. This one now is going to be the bottom one, so let's go ahead and bring this all the way down to where our screen starts, which is right about here. Perfect. This bottom one's going to need to be a little bit bigger because we're going to have the mini map in here and also some of these selectors. So let's go ahead and make this about, let's do this big for now. We might adjust it later. Awesome. All right, so now that we got that for the backgrounds, I think we should be okay, so we can close backgrounds. Let's go ahead, right click on UI again, add child node. We're going to add another node 2D. All right, in this node 2D, we are going to have all the labels. So let's go ahead and we're going to call this resource text. Perfect. All right, in resource text, we need to go ahead and add those labels. So let's right click on it, add child node. Let's go ahead and find label. Perfect. All right, so we need a label for the wood, food, gold, and population count, okay? So let's go ahead, let's open this up. Let's call this label wood. There we go. Awesome. We're just gonna go ahead and give it a simple text of wood, with a colon, and a 0 just for now as a placeholder. Awesome. We want this to be pretty centered, so let's go ahead and bring this down a bit. Let's go ahead and leave it as less for a horizontal line. For vertical alignment, we are going to make that center. Perfect. Let's make it a little bit longer here. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and take that label wood, Control D. Let's move it on over, just so it's kind of on the edge of it. Perfect. Let's change the name of this. This will be our label for the food. So let's go ahead, label food. Perfect. Change the text, call it food. Awesome. Let's do the next one now. Control D. Change the name. This one will be for the gold. So let's do gold here. Perfect. Bring it on over. There we go. Change the text. Perfect. Now let's do the population one. Control D. Let's bring it over. Change the name. Label population. Let's go ahead. There we go. Perfect. Let's go ahead and change the text over here. Awesome. And this one's going to be a 0/0, all right? Because we want to know the current amount and then also the max amount we can have, okay? Perfect. But that looks pretty good. I like it. Awesome. One thing we could do, though, is simply just move it over a little bit because as you can see, looks like the wood text is right on the left and that doesn't look too good. So if you want to just move all of them at once, you can simply select the one here and just simply drag it over just a bit. So it's like that. Select away, and there we go. Looks much better. Awesome. All right, that's going to be it for our resource text. Perfect. All right, so the next thing we could do is let's just go ahead and do the little map we have, our little mini map. That's going to help us basically locate where we are in the current big map. So let's go ahead, right click on UI node, add child node. Let's add another node 2D. Let's rename this mini map. Mini map. Awesome. All right. So mini map is going to be on the bottom right corner. It's going to be an outer box of white and then a little white box in the middle. So let's go ahead and make that. Let's right click, add child node. Let's do a color rect. And you know, actually, before we do the color rect, let's do another node 2D. And let's call this outer box, all right? Just so we can keep things organized. So we'll do outer box for that outside box, and then we'll create another one for the inside one. All right, so for outer box, let's go ahead, add child node, do color rect. Awesome. All right, so I want the location to be exact. So let's go to layout. And let me just double check what I did for mine. So go to layout, transform. Let me go into mine real quick, and then we can see exactly where we want to put it. So everything matches up where mine is. All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that outer box. Again, go to transform, go to the position. We're going to make this 953 here, 953. There we go. And the Y value of, let's see, I did 526, which worked pretty well. Perfect. All right, now we need to go ahead and make sure it is the appropriate length and width. So let's go ahead, use our tool here, make sure we're selecting the color rect. Here we go. Awesome. Let's go ahead and just make a box, something like this. Awesome. Perfect. Let's go ahead then also, and we're going to duplicate this a couple times just so we can make it go all the way around. We might need to move it up a little bit just so it fits a little better. And you know what? We might just do that while we're at it. We can readjust it later. Let's move it up a little bit. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead, Control D. Let's take that one we just created. We're going to go to layout again, transform, and we're simply going to change the rotation to 90 degrees. There we go. Perfect. Let's duplicate that one. Control D. We're going to move it on over. Perfect. And if you guessed it, we're simply going to take that original one we had, Control D, and then we're just going to move it down. And there is our perfect square. Awesome. You can zoom in just to make sure it's exact, but it should be pretty good. Awesome. All right, so that's going to be our outer box for our mini map. Now we need to make the inside one. So let's go ahead and create another node for this. We're going to do node. Perfect. And we're going to go ahead, change the name of this. Let's just call this screen. So we'll call this screen because that's going to represent our screen. Let's go ahead inside of there now, add another color rect. Awesome. And let's move the whole thing. So remember to grab it up here. We're going to move it directly in the middle here, and we might adjust it later. Perfect. Let's change the size of this because that's a little too big. Let's go to layout, transform, And for size, we can simply cut that in half for the y value. So let's make this 20. Perfect. Might even make this a little less. Let's try 30 here. And then let's do 15 for the y. Perfect. Awesome. And now let's simply just center it up. This probably isn't going to be the exact center. Oop, make sure you are not selecting the color X. Make sure you're selecting the screen. All right. Awesome. So let's go ahead and center that up a bit. That should be good. We might need to go a little bit more to the right. But like I said, we are going to readjust this later. But just as a placeholder, this should be good. All right. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Looking good. Let's keep going. I'm going to close that up. I'm going to close the mini map. Perfect. All right. So now we need to create the vil or worker build options. Sometimes I'm going to say the workers are also vils. I just get it kind of mixed up. But the workers / vils, we're going to create some options for them, which are going to be the build options. All right. So that's going to pop up in the UI as well. Let's go ahead, create a node for that. All right, let's go ahead and call this the worker build options. All right, awesome. All right, worker build options are going to be placed on the left here. It's going to be a button for each type of building they can create. So let's go ahead and create a node for each type of building. Let's go ahead and do that. Perfect. Let's call this first one TC for town center. All right. So TC, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a sprite to this. All right. Now the sprite is going to represent what exactly is inside of this. So to do that, we're going to go ahead, open up our art, open up, I think it's in the Kenny Sci-Fi RTS. And it's not going to be in tile sheet. It's going to be in the PNG, default size. It's going to be structure. And I'm going to be using this one here. You can use whichever one you want. But I'm going to be using the sci-fi structure _07.png. So just take that and drag and drop it into our sprite 2D. Perfect. All right, let's change the size a little bit because it's a little big. Select our sprite 2D. Let's go to the transform. Let's do 0.5 for this, for each. There we go, and that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and grab the sprite 2D. And you know what, instead of grabbing it to keep things organized again, let's use the exact positioning. So we're going to go ahead and move the X over a little bit. Let's see what 20 looks like. We might need to do more, just a little bit more. Let's do 30 then. There we go. Then for the Y value, let's try something like 550. A little bit too low. Let's try 520. And perfect. Awesome. Yep, you can go a little lower if you want, but I think that works pretty well. I might make it match the side on the left, so let's go ahead and do 510. Whoopsie. I should have done 530 actually. There we go. You could even do 525. That might actually look a little bit better. Perfect. All right, we'll do 525. Awesome. All right, so there is our image for that. Now we need to add a couple things on it, specifically the actual button itself. So let's go ahead, right click on the sprite 2D, add child node. We're going to create a button on that. Awesome. And we just have to rename the button. So button, we're going to say this button build TC. All right. We have to reshape this. We need to make it match with the original. So let's take those sides and simply just match it up. I need to go a little higher. There we go. Awesome. Perfect. And we could also make the visibility a little bit more clear because it's automatically darkened out. So let's go to the visibility, self-modulate, and just turn down the A value to like 100. That might look pretty good. Awesome. All right, perfect. And that's going to be our button to build the TCs. Awesome. All right, let's continue though. We have to make all the other ones now. But because we made this one, they're going to be pretty easy to create. So let's just simply select them. Control D. Now we have TC2. We're going to change this one to, let's name this one farm. And this is the only one that's going to be a little bit different. First thing we're going to do is change the position. Let's go to transform. Oops, make sure you're using transform on the sprite 2D. There we go. Let's move the X position another 30 over. So we're going to do 60. That might not be enough. Let's try a 50 over, which would be 80. And a little too much. We'll do 40 over, which would be 70. Perfect. That looks pretty good to me. Awesome. All right, so now we need an image for this. Now this is going to be a little bit different. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm simply going to go ahead and use an environmental structure this time. And we're going to find a piece that we want to use, such as this one here, which is going to be the sci-fi environment _16.png. I think this will look pretty good. Drag and drop it on there. Now if you zoom in a little bit, it's this little berry thing. So I think a really cool thing we could do is just add a couple more around it. So let's go ahead, right click. Let's add more sprite 2Ds. Make sure it is above the button though, or else it's going to block it. Let's go ahead, add some more of these in there. And there we go. Let's go ahead and just move them in the corners. I'm going to move one like over here. Control D. Oops, make sure it's on the same line. Let's do like another one there, if it lets me. There we go. How does that look? Pretty good, I like it. Let's do some more for the ones below it. I'm simply going to go ahead, bring this down. Let's do one like right here, maybe a little lower. And then let's go ahead, copy the other one we made. Let's bring that down as well. Make sure it's pretty much matched up. Awesome, let's zoom in to see that. Looks pretty good to me. Awesome. All right, so that'll be our farm button. I like it. You can make it however you want. I just think that looks pretty good to represent the actual farm we get to create. All right, awesome. Let's go ahead, close that. The next thing we need to do, of course, is change the button name. So we have button build TC. We need to name that button farm. All right. It's important to keep these unique so we don't get mixed up once we start connecting these to the script. All right, awesome. Let's go ahead, close that up. I'm going to go ahead and select the TC one again because it only had one sprite. We don't need all those extra sprites for the other ones. So for TC2, we're going to rename this, and we're going to call this house. So we can build a new house. And because we're doing 40 extra for the sprite 2D, we need to do 80 extra for this, which I think is going to be like 110. There we go, perfect. Let's find the house sprite we want to use, which is going to be in the structure. It's going to be this one right here, the sci-fi structure _07.png. I think this looks pretty good. Or whoopsie, that's the same one we just used. It's actually going to be, there we go, this one here. Sci-fi structure _04. All right, that's the one I want to use. Perfect. All right, don't forget, we also got to change the name. We have button build TC. We got to change that to button build house. All right, awesome. Perfect. I like it. All right, let's go ahead, duplicate this one again, Control D. Change the name. We're going to call this barracks, which can create our close range units. Might be spelling that wrong, but oh well. Barracks. Let's go ahead, select the sprite 2D, go to the transform. Remember, we're adding 40 here, so that's going to be 150 for the X value. Perfect. Select the type of structure you want to use. I think a good one will be this one here, right above, the sci-fi structure _3. All right, let's take that, put it there. Perfect. Don't forget, we got to rename the actual button sprite. So button build barracks. Perfect. Awesome. Let's go ahead, close that up. Let's select the barracks, Control D. Change this one to, I'm going to call this range for our ranged units. Awesome. Select the sprite. Let's add 40 to the X, which is going to be 190. Perfect. And I think a good range building is going to be this one here, sci-fi structure _05.png. Let's drag and drop that in there. Perfect. And let's go ahead, rename the button as well. So instead of button build barracks, we're going to call this button build range, just like that. Awesome. All right, almost done. Let's close that up as well. Let's do the last building, which is going to be the tower one. So Control D. Let's go ahead, change the name to tower. Perfect. Let's go ahead, change the name of the button as well. So button build tower. And then last but not least, so we don't forget, let's change the actual image itself, which is going to be, I think we could use like the sci-fi structure _11. Let's use that one. Perfect. And don't forget, we got to move it over. So let's go to the transform. Let's go ahead and add 40, which is going to be, I think, 230. There we go. Perfect. Awesome. So there's our tower. Looking good. Awesome. All right, perfect. So that's going to be it for our worker build options. And this is not always going to be on. This is only going to be on when we have worker/vills selected. So let's go ahead and turn this off for now, just like that. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so now we have 2 more to make. We need a screen for winning the game and losing the game. So let's go ahead and create one of those. In our UI, let's go ahead, select our node 2D. And we're going to rename this. We're going to call this win screen. Awesome. All right, win screen. We're going to go ahead, simply add a couple things. We're going to add a label that tells the player they won. So let's go ahead and just make this pretty much as big as the screen, maybe halfway, something like that, a little lower. Awesome. Let's go ahead and just say you win, exclamation point, and then just center it all up. Perfect. We could add some label settings to it as well. Let's go ahead, give it a font of something pretty big. Let's do like 120. And let's go ahead and give it an outline as well of like 40. Change the outline color to black. And there we go. Awesome. All right, one more thing we could also do. Let's go ahead and give it a panel so it kind of darkens out the outside of the screen, or the entirety of the screen, but outside of the actual label. So put this above the label here, and just simply stretch this out to pretty much how big the screen is. Perfect. Awesome. That will also block anything being selected on the screen, all right, which is good because you don't want the players to continue to play the game once you win or lose, all right? Awesome. Then, of course, we need an actual play again button, so let's go ahead. Let's add a new button here. And you can customize this button however you want. I'm just going to keep it very simple. So I'm going to go ahead, just make it a little big here. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and just move it to right underneath. So right about there. And let's just put play again, question mark. Perfect. Awesome. And I don't really like how high up the text is, so I might move that down just a little bit. Something like that. Perfect. Don't forget we got to rename the actual button itself. So button play again. All right. Awesome. All right. Next up, we need a lose screen. Even if you guessed it, we're simply just going to duplicate our win screen and change the text. All right. So let's go ahead. Select it. Control D. Let's turn off the win screen so we can see what we're working with. Change the name to lose screen. Perfect. Go into the label and simply change this to you lose, and we're going to do a frowny face, just like that. Perfect. Awesome. And you can leave everything the same, especially the button right here. We can leave the name the same as well because it's going to have the same functionality. Now, maybe in the future, if you added more to this game where you have like a main menu section, you could totally have like a go back to main menu button as well. All right, but let's go ahead and close this up. Let's turn this one off and save what you got so far. Looking good. All right, in this section, we're going to create the global script. We're going to start off creating a new global script. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the global variables that we will be using in the game. Last but not least, we will also create a function that resets all the game values for when the game is over and played again. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and create this global script. So let's go ahead and go up to our project settings. Let's go to globals. And then in the globals tab, let's go to the node name. And we're just going to call this capital G global. Go ahead and add that. Global.gd, go ahead, create. To open it up, just select the little folder button right here, and there we go. Awesome. All right, so this global script is going to be kind of a area that we can access different variables throughout all the other scripts. All right, these are great to use, especially in a game like this, where we have a lot of different variables that we need to keep track of. All right, so let's go ahead and begin starting to add some of these variables. Let's go ahead. Start off here with a variable. We're going to call this add underscore nav underscore spot. And this is going to be a packed vector2 array. Perfect. Now this array is going to be used to house basically new spots we want to turn our map into navigation spots. So we're going to have basically navigation spots and then no navigation spots. So things that are not going to have navigation on them are going to be things like the trees, the gold, some of the buildings, all those things that we don't want our units and enemies to just pass through. All right. So we have this one here. Let's duplicate it. This one's going to be the no nav spot. So add to underscore no underscore nav spot. All right. So everything in here we're going to be able to pass through, and everything in here we are not going to be. All right. Awesome. We're also going to need another variable to keep track of if our workers are selected. So we're going to do workers underscore selected. And we're going to go ahead and equal that to false starting off. Perfect. Below that, we're also going to create a variable, and we're going to call this building underscore selected. Now, why do we need two variables for these things? Well, for instance, we're going to have certain things open when we have a worker selected, such as the worker build options. We only want those open when we have a worker selected. And then we're also going to have some UI only showing when we have certain buildings selected. All right. So that's why we need some bools for those things. Now, outside of those variables, we also need some variables for some of our resource counters. So we're going to call this food underscore count. And we're going to start this off to something pretty high. I'm going to keep it at 1200 just because we're going to need a lot of resources to test things out. Normally it wouldn't be that too high, but again, for testing purposes, we're going to keep that there. We're also going to need a variable for our gold count. So gold count. And we're also just going to equal that to 1200. We're also going to go ahead and create a variable for wood count. Equal that to 1200. Perfect. And we're going to need our population count. And equal that again, we're just going to keep that at 0 because we start off with 0 population. All right. Now, apart from the population count, because we're also limiting how many population we can have, we're going to need a max population count. So I'm going to copy that variable, simply create another one, just put the word max in front of it. All right. Just like that. Because remember, we should never have or never be able to create more units or workers if our current max is out. All right. So if we are maxed out, then we shouldn't be able to create more. Again, it doesn't really come into effect though if we end up losing more max population count, such as the TCs and houses. But you'll see that in a bit once we start testing things out. All right. Next couple variables. These are going to be for some of the targets. So we're going to need a couple things to pass along to the targets, such as a new underscore worker underscore target. We're going to equal that to null starting off. The worker target, of course, is going to basically tell what job we're going to. So like if we're going to basically cut trees down, or if we're going to go ahead and start farming a farm, then this will be set appropriately. All right. We're also going to go ahead. We're going to create another one. This is going to be for target type. So new underscore worker underscore target underscore type. All right, awesome. We're also going to equal that to null. Perfect. And we're going to have two more. We're going to have another one here, which is going to be new underscore worker underscore target underscore job, which is going to be the job type that we're doing. Awesome. And then last but not least, we are going to need a specific ID for every single thing we are going to have to be interacting with. So basically every single tree, enemy, farm, even building is going to have its own ID. So we're going to need a new worker target ID value for this. All right. Awesome. Perfect. That's looking good for there. Now we're just missing two more. And this is going to be for the counters of how many enemies are in the world and how many good units are in the world. And we basically lose the game if we are out of good units, and we win the game if they are out of enemy units. All right, so we're going to need a variable for each one of those. So enemy underscore units equal that to 0 starting off. And then we're also going to need one for the good units. So we're going to need good underscore units. And we're going to equal that to 0. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so these are going to be all of our global variables. All right. And remember, we also need a function now to reset all these, because when we reset our entire tree node, it's not going to actually reset the global variables. So we need to have a function to kind of force the reset of these. All right. So we can simply do that in a pretty easy way. Underneath our process function down here, we're simply going to go ahead, create a function, and we're going to call this reset underscore all underscore variables, or just var. All right. Give it an empty set of parentheses, a colon, and then simply go ahead and just copy all of our variables. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste them on here. And we're simply just going to get rid of all the var at the beginning. Make sure to add a tab for each one though. So just like that, and just keep going until you got them all. Because again, this is going to be going into effect anytime we win or lose the game. And then we go ahead and select the play again button. All right. Awesome. So let's get one here, another over here. Make sure you have the spacing correctly, or it's going to give you an error. And then we're also going to do here. And we're also going to do here as well. A couple more left. Awesome. Almost there. And getting closer. Perfect. Awesome. So that's going to be our reset all variable functions. All right. Perfect. Let's go ahead and save everything we got in here. Remember, you can always check the source code if you get confused. But looking good so far. Let's go back to the 2D view. And perfect. All right. All right. In this section, we're going to go ahead and create the camera script. We're going to start off creating a new camera script and attaching it to our camera 2D node. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the variables that we're going to be using. Last but not least, we are going to create some code to move the camera and the minimap up, down, left, and right, depending on the mouse movement. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and create this camera script. So let's go ahead and select the camera 2D node we created earlier. I'm also going to close up our UI. Let's go ahead and attach a new script. We can leave the name as camera underscore 2D. Let's create that. Perfect. All right, let's start off with creating a couple variables. These are just going to be basically some bools telling it to go up, down, left, and right. So we're going to do a variable for cam underscore move underscore right. And we're going to go ahead, equal that to false. And if you guessed it, we're going to do one for each direction we're moving. So I'm simply going to copy that, paste it in. So we have camera move right. So we're going to need camera move left. We're going to need cam move up. And we're going to need cam move down. All right. Perfect. Awesome. Make sure you got that there. Looking good. All right. Now we're going to add a couple things in the process function. This is going to be the actual ability of moving it around. And the way I'm going to do it is going to be if our mouse is at the utmost top of the screen, then we're going to move up. If it's at the right side, it's going to move right. If it's at the bottom side, it's going to move to the bottom. And if it's to the left, it's going to move to the left. So basically, we're going to trigger something happening when our mouse is on either side or up and down of the screen. All right. To do this, we're going to add a couple switches. So we're going to start off with an if statement. If we're going to use get local mouse position. And what we're going to be looking for here is our .x. And we're going to say if it is greater than 540, which should be the size of the screen. All right. If it's greater than 540, then what we're going to do is we're simply going to set our cam move right equal that to true. And we're going to set our cam move left and equal that to false. All right. Perfect. Awesome. So that's where we're going to basically move to the right, all right, or initiate the move. We'll add the actual movement of it after these switches, all right. So let's go ahead to the next one. I'm just going to copy the whole thing and adjust it as necessary. This one is going to be a less than, a negative 540, okay? And if you guessed it, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to move our to left true this time and move our right to false this time, all right? Awesome, perfect. All right, now we need one basically saying it's not going to move either one if we are in the middle of this area, all right? And we can simply do that again with another if statement. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to set both of our values to false, all right? But we're basically going to combine some things and switch them around. So this first one, the negative one, we no longer want the less than symbol here. We are going to want the greater than, all right? But we're also going to want an and, all right? And again, we're going to get our local mouse position. And then what we're going to do, again, is our dot x. And we're going to say is less than 540, all right? So basically, if our mouse is in the center, it's not going to be moving the screen, which is what we want. We only want to move it when our mouse goes above, or sorry, when it goes to the right or to the left, okay? But when it's in the middle, we don't want it to move at all, all right? So now we need to do the same thing with the y values. So it's going to be pretty similar. So what we could do is just copy, or better yet, we'll just type it out. What we'll do, I'll add a space there. We're going to go ahead, do an if statement, get local mouse position. And this time, we're doing .y, all right? And we're going to say .y is greater than 280, which I found to be a good position. You can always mess around with these numbers if you want to, but I think these work pretty well with what we're working with. Inside of here, if you guessed it, we're going to do our cam move up equals false, and then our cam move down equals true, all right? Perfect. There we go. Now we just need to do the reverse. I'm going to add a couple enters here so we have a couple room. There we go. All right, I'm going to copy our if statement, and then right below it, we're going to paste it, and we're going to go ahead, and we're going to do greater than this time, negative 280. And we're just simply going to switch around our if statements, or our little bools, from the up one equaling it to true, and then our down one equaling it to false this time, all right? Because of course, if we go above the screen with our mouse, we want to move the screen up, and if we go below it, we want to move it down. Now we just need to have a calculation that cancels them both out in case we're in the middle of those two values, all right? So let's go ahead and create that. I'm going to go ahead, copy current one here, and just like we did with the x values, we're going to go ahead and switch some things around. We're going to, of course, switch our symbol here to go then greater than negative 280, and again, get local mouse position. And we're going to go ahead, do .y, and we're going to go ahead, do less than now, 280. All right, and don't forget, we got to go ahead and make our can move false for up and down. All right, perfect, awesome. So these are going to be the switches for how we're going to go about locating when and when not to move the actual screen. All right, now we need to add the actual movement itself to not only the camera 2D, but also that mini box that we have, all right, which is going to be inside of this one here, which is going to be the screen, all right, because we want the screen to kind of match up with the same movement of our camera, so we know exactly where we are in the entire map. All right, awesome. So let's get started. I'm going to add some spaces down here. All right, so what we're going to do is an if statement and say if cam move right double equals true and position dot x is less than or equal to 2040, and this is what I just found to be basically where we don't want to be moving past the actual screen. You can adjust this if your map size is different than mine, but if you're following along, it should match up with these values. We might have to adjust it, but this worked for me pretty well in the past. All right, so that's going to be our where exactly in the real map of the game is where we're going to prevent the movement. All right, so we have that there, and inside of it, we're simply going to set our position, which is going to be the position of the camera 2D node, plus equals vector 2. And what we're going to be doing is, of course, moving the x value forward, which is going to be 1. And then we're going to times the whole thing by 6. All right, and you can adjust the speed if you want to. But again, this matches up pretty well with the mini-map, as I found before. And how we are going to move the mini-map is we are going to simply drag and drop the screen node right over here that we have in the mini-map node right here. And we're going to do a dot position plus equals vector 2. Again, 1, 0. And then we are going to times the whole thing by 0.2. Now, why are we doing that? Well, if you remember, the mini-map is a lot smaller than the actual screen itself. So we need it to kind of match up, and I found that 6 and 0.2 works really well together. Again, we might adjust this after testing, but for now, we'll leave it as is. All right, awesome. So that's going to be for the cam move right. So now we need it for the others. Let's just copy this whole thing. I'm going to simply paste it underneath it. Perfect. Let's do the cam move left now. So cam move left. Awesome. And what I found was greater than equal this time, then negative 870. All right, and that was the location of the map I had earlier, which we will be matching it up. So we'll do that. Negative 870. Awesome. And instead of our plus equals for our vector 2's, we're going to minus them now because we are now moving in the opposite direction as the one above. Okay, perfect. So there you go. So that's going to be it for our cam move right and cam move left. Now we need to do the down and up ones. All right, so let's copy the whole thing. Let's go ahead, underneath it, paste it. And we're going to go ahead and do cam move down. And remember, this one now is going to be a .y, so make sure we change our position to .y. And what I found was 1700 being a good value for this. Make sure also that we are doing a less than equal. And then again, 1700. All right, perfect. Awesome. All right. And then what we are going to change in here is, of course, make these both positive. So we're doing a positive there and a positive there. And then we are not going to be moving in the x direction, so now we need to move in the y direction. So we need to change our vector 2's, all right, to a 1 for the y's and a 0 for the x's. All right, just like that. Perfect. Let's do the last one now. Let's copy the whole thing. Backspace. All right, we're going to do cam move up. And we're going to go ahead. We're going to change our value to a greater than equal now. And we are going to be greater than equal the value of negative 1060. All right, awesome. And if you guessed it, we are only going to be changing the actual plus equals to a minus equal now for each value inside. All right, awesome, perfect. And there you go. We can get rid of this extra space here. Perfect. Remember to double check your code. You can always check the source code, save what you got, and looking good. All right, let's test things out now. So let's go ahead and simply save your work and then hit play. And I know we're not going to be able to see the actual screen moving here, but we will be able to see the mini box on the right. And if you go ahead and move your mouse up, you will see it moving now. Perfect, just like that. Looks like it's a good spot there. Let's make sure on the bottom part now. Let's go ahead and move all the way down. Should be good. There we go. Let's go up a little bit and go to the right. And whoops, looks like it goes a little too far. That might be because the actual image itself is a little big and we could just move the whole thing over to the left a little bit. Let's check this side out. Looks like that side's pretty good. All right, so let's go ahead and just move the entire box a little bit to the left, and then we can make the actual inside box a little bit shorter on the sides. All right, so let's go to 2D view. Let's go ahead and let's go inside of our screen. There we go. Let's go ahead and make the box a little shorter on each side. So we can do that pretty easily. If we go ahead and, you know, we could actually just make the entire thing a little shorter. So if we select it there, we go to transform. We unchain its scaling. And for its X value, we're simply going to go ahead and make this like a 0.8. Might be a little too much. Maybe like a 8.5. Awesome. And then what we want to do is just move the whole thing a little bit to the left. We might need to recenter a little bit because we just closed it. So I might center a little bit more there. Maybe a little more back. And then we're going to, of course, move the entire box a little bit to the left. Okay. So let's take that mini map. Let's simply just move it a little bit to the left. All right. Let's go ahead and hit play and see how that looks. You might need to adjust some things. Let's just double check. So we go all the way to the right. Looks like it still is a little far in there. But I like how the box isn't too big though this time. We go to the left. And that one's pretty good to me. It looks like this right side one is still going inside of it a little too much. So we can adjust the code value to fix that. Because I don't really like how far in it goes. So let's go ahead. Let's go to script. And it's going to be our values here. So this is going to be the move right. All right, so our move right is a little too much. So let's go ahead and just lower this by, let's do like 30. So we would do 10. Save that. So that's going to be 2010 there. Let's go ahead, hit play. And again, you might need to adjust these for yours. It really depends. But it's pretty easy to figure out on that part. So we're a little better over there. Let's go all the way over here. That side's pretty good now. Perfect. So our can move right. Still a little funky there. Let's go ahead and change that to, let's try like 1970. And let's double check it, hit play. Go all the way to the right. There we go, a little better. All the way to the left. We might be changing the wrong one, actually. That might be the reason. Let's just double check it. Nope. It's just still not there, though, because if we go to the right, looks like it's still sticking in a little too much. So we might need to lower it down a little bit more. Just a little bit. So we have that. Let's do 40. All right. Hit play. Let's go ahead all the way to the right. See how this looks. Much better. Let's again compare it to the other side. And we should, I think, be good. Yep, perfect. I kind of like it. Now again, you can adjust this if you want to. That's completely up to you. But I like it so far, so I'm going to keep it. All right. I'm going to save what I got. Go back to 2D view. Zoom out a little bit. And there we go. So far, so good. All right, in this section, we will create our build options script. We will start off creating a new script called worker build options and attach it to our worker build options in the UI node. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the variables that we will be using. Then we're going to go ahead and create some code for each build option you have. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started creating the script. So let's go ahead and select our node that we want the script on, which is going to be our worker build options. We can close the mini map for now. Let's go ahead and make sure you're selecting it. Once you have it selected, let's go ahead and add a script to it. You can leave the script name as worker_build_options.gd. Go ahead, hit create, and there we go. Awesome. So let's go ahead and start off with a couple of variables. These are going to be the actual things we are going to be creating. Eventually we can drag and drop them into here, but for now we're just going to have them as placeholders. So we're going to do export var, and we're going to call this new underscore town underscore center. And we're going to give it a colon, and it's going to be a type of a packed scene. Perfect, just like that. So we need one for each option we can create. So let's go ahead and just copy this. Let's paste it below and just change it. All right, the next one is going to be for the house. So we can just change the name to house, just like that. Perfect. Then right below it, we're going to go ahead. We can change this one here to farm. Awesome. Let's do the next one. We're going to go ahead, change this one to barracks. Perfect. Let's do the next one. We're going to go ahead. This one's going to be range underscore B for building. Perfect. Let's go ahead, do the next one. This is going to be for the tower. So make sure you just change the name to tower, just like that. Perfect. Awesome. So like I said before, eventually we are going to drag and drop each of these inside the node. You can see it on the inspector side right here. Currently they're all set to empty, but once we get it finished, we're going to have these all entirely filled out. All right, perfect. So make sure you have those down. Then we're going to go ahead and start working on some of the actual functions for each button. All right. An easy way to do that is simply open up our node, go to the actual node that we want, like TC, select the button build TC, go to the node on the inspector, and select the pressed. All right. Make sure you are highlighting on the exact script you want to add it to, such as the worker build options. Hit connect, and there you go. Perfect. So what we're going to add in here is simply a couple things. We're going to start off with an if statement, and we're going to set global dot wood count, because we need to charge some wood for creating this. We're going to do greater than equal to 50. And we're also going to add this one to be gold as well. So and global dot gold count. And again, we're going to make this greater than equal to 50 as well. Now you can make these values whatever you want. I just think it works pretty good for testing, so I'm going to leave it as is. All right, the next thing we need to do is actually create the new item. So with this one's going to be, of course, the TC. So we're going to have to create a new variable for this. That's going to be variable. We're just going to call this new underscore building. Then we're going to equal that to our new TC variable. So new town center. We have to instantiate it to create it inside the game. So instantiate an empty set of parentheses just like that. All right, awesome. Now we need to tell it exactly where we want to put it. All right. Now I think where we are going to put this thing is we're going to go ahead and create a new area for this. Or you know what? We can just actually put it straight inside the game objects instead. I was thinking about having a node specific inside here for these kind of objects, but just to keep things simple, I'm just going to keep them entirely in the game objects. All right. So to add that, you just simply drag and drop the game objects node right here. Perfect. Then we're going to go ahead and do a dot add child because we are adding something into that node, and that is going to be our new building variable. All right. Perfect. Now, of course, because we spent certain items here, such as the wood and gold count, we need to update minusing those now. And if you guessed it, it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to do a global dot, and we're going to do wood count. And we're going to do a minus equals 50, and then pretty much the same thing for the gold now. So gold, or global dot gold count minus equals 50. Perfect. And that's how we're going to go about all the selections for these buildings. All right. So we got this one done. Let's go ahead and add the next one now. So we can close up the TC one. Let's open up the house one now. Let's go ahead, find the button. Make sure it says button build house. Go to the pressed for it. Make sure it's connecting to the worker build options. Hit connect, and there we go. Awesome. And what we could do, just to keep things simple, let's just simply copy everything we have in the one above it and just paste it in. Just like that. Now, if you wanted to, we don't have to make everything cost wood and gold. We could just make this one cost wood and the rest of them as well, just to keep things simple. Just minus that out. Make sure you have the colon there. The one thing we do need to change in here, though, is, of course, the actual instantiate. Because we are no longer creating the new town center, we need to make sure this says house, all right? But we can keep the other things the same, except for, of course, the minusing of gold, because this one is only going to cost wood. All right, perfect. So there we go. That's how we can do the build house one. So let's close up the house one. Let's do the next one for the barracks. Open it all the way until you find button build barracks. Press to make sure it's selecting the worker build script. There we go. I'm going to minus these out so we're pretty similar to the one above. I'm going to copy everything inside of that and just simply paste it in. And remember, the only thing we have to change now is going to be the actual dot instantiate. So this one here is going to be for the barracks. So let's go ahead, find barracks, and there you go. Perfect. Let's go ahead, let's do the next one. Let's go ahead, close up barracks on the left, open up range, Open up the sprite, find the button build range, go to pressed, make sure it's selecting worker build options, hit connect, and there we go. Awesome. Let's copy everything inside of it. Perfect. Paste it in. Simply change the barracks.instantiate to range_b instantiate. All right, perfect. Awesome. Let's do the next one now. Let's close range up. Let's open up tower. Select the button build tower. Go to pressed. Make sure it's selecting worker build options. Perfect. Let's copy the if statement. Let's paste it in. Don't forget, you got to change that range_b to just the tower one. Perfect. Now we just have one more to do. That's going to be the farm one. Let's open that up. Open up the sprite. Select the button. Go to pressed. Make sure it's connected to worker build options. Hit connect. Perfect. Let's go ahead and copy the if statement. Paste it in. Don't forget, change the tower. Let's change this to farm. And there we go. Awesome. All right, save all that. You can close up the farm, and you can also close up the worker build options. And perfect. Now remember, you can always check the source code, but so far things are looking good. Let's go back to our 2D view, save what you got, and there you go. All right, in this section, we're going to create the UI script. We're going to start off creating a new UI script and attaching it to our main UI node. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the variables that we will be using. Last but not least, we will create some code for updating the labels and keep track of the worker selection. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating this UI script. So let's go ahead and select the main node of the UI right here. Perfect. Go ahead and add a script to it. Hit create, and there we go. Awesome. All right. So in this script, we actually don't need any variables, but we are going to add quite a few things in our function for our process. All right. So first we need to update basically all the text for all the counts, such as the food count, the wood count, gold count, and even the population. Now to do this, it's pretty easy. We just have to go ahead, open up our resource text, drag and drop in our label, such as label wood. We're going to go ahead and do a .text, and we're going to set that equal to, in double quotes, capital F, or actually capital W for wood, and we're going to give it a colon and a space. All right. Once you have that there, next to it, outside of the quotes, we're going to do a plus. We're going to get our global variable now, global dot, and we're going to do wood count. Perfect. Now one thing we have to do though, for it to work properly, is we need to turn wood count into a string because this is currently an integer. All right. To do that, just do str, give it a set of parentheses, and make sure it's closed out at the end of it, just like that. Perfect. Awesome. So that's going to update our wood count. Now we need to do this for each type of resource. So we can go ahead and simply drag and drop in our next one, which is the food count. Don't forget to add that tab there. Do a .text. Do an equal sign, double quotes. We're going to do food, colon, space, plus str, double quotes, and inside of there, do our global dot food count. All right, perfect. Let's do the gold one now. Let's go ahead, drag and drop in the label gold. .text equals, double quotes, gold, colon, space. Outside of it, do a plus, str. Inside of there, add our global dot gold count. Perfect. Awesome. All right, looking good. Now for the next one, we're going to do the population one. So drag and drop the label population. Do a .text equals, quotes, population. There we go. And we're going to go ahead, colon, space. We're going to do a plus, str, give it a set of parentheses, global, dot, and it should be population count. But if you remember, we're also going to have the max one showing as well. So we're going to go ahead, do a plus, double quotes, a slash, so we can separate them, another plus, an str, and then we're going to do the global dot max population count. All right, perfect. And that's going to give it that nice look that we want. All right, awesome. Make sure you got that down. All right, next thing we're going to do is just kind of keep track of whether or not we want our worker build options to be open. And to make sure that it is opening correctly, we're going to do an if statement and say if our global dot worker selected equals true, double equal signs. If it equals true, then we are going to want our worker build options open. So go ahead, drag and drop that. Do a dot visible. Oopsie. Dot visible. And then we're going to equal that to true. And if you guessed it, we're going to do another one, an entire if right underneath it. And this time we're going to, if it equals false, then we're going to make our visibility equal false as well. All right, perfect. So if we save that and we go back to our 2D here, we go ahead and we make sure this is on. If we hit the play button now, we shouldn't be able to see that because we have none selected. See, there you go. Awesome. All right, looking good so far. Don't forget to save. All right, in this section, we're going to go ahead and create the game object script. We're going to start off creating a new game object script and attaching it to the main game node. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the variables that we're going to be using. Then we're going to go ahead and create some code for creating a box and selecting visible workers / vils on the screen. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started creating this script. Now this script is very important because it's going to help us basically select our units and our workers using the top node, which is going to be the game objects node. All right, so let's go ahead and select that. You can close up the UI one for now. All right, the game objects, let's go ahead and add a script. We can leave the name as game_objects.gd. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go ahead and just remove everything we have here currently. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a couple variables. So let's go ahead on line 3. Let's create a new variable. Let's call it dragging. And we're going to equal that to false. If you guessed it, this is basically going to tell whether or not we are dragging for our little box we're going to create when selecting things. We're also going to create another variable. This one's going to be called drag_start. So where we are going to start the dragging effect. We're going to make this a vector2. And this is going to be a .0 vector2, so it's not going to equal anything starting off. Then we're going to go ahead. We're going to create another variable. We're going to call this select_rect for rectangle. Then we're going to equal this to capital R. We're going to equal this to rectangle shape 2D. And this is going to be a .new. And this is going to actually create that new rectangle shape that we're going to be using. All right, awesome. All right, next up, we're going to have an empty array. This is going to be called selected. And if you guessed it, everything selected is going to be placed inside this array. All right, so give it an empty set of brackets just like that. Perfect. All right. So next up, we're going to create a new function. Now this is going to be the actual effect of selecting things and creating where exactly we're going to create our shape. So we're going to go ahead and do an underscore. This is going to be a unhandled input. Make sure it has event inside the parentheses set. This is going to happen, of course, once we start selecting on the map and then, of course, dragging it over. So we need a couple things to happen in here. The first thing is, of course, starting off with an if statement of event. And it's going to be an is input event mouse button. So input, capital E, event, mouse, button. All right, awesome. And we're going to do an invent dot button index underscore index. And we're just going to equal this to our mouse button left. This is just a simple way that we can go ahead and initiate, hey, we're selecting our left mouse button on the map. All right, awesome. So make sure you have that there. Perfect. Inside of there, we need to have a couple other if statements, starting off with an if event pressed. So if the actual event is pressed, go ahead, just press, not is pressed. Whoopsie. Pressed, just like that, give it a colon. So if event.pressed, and then we're going to have another if, because we need to tell whether or not we have things actually inside of our selected. And to do that, we're going to do a selected.size. So if the size of the array is equal to 0, so if nothing's inside of it, then we're going to go ahead and set our dragging bool equal to true. And we're also going to go ahead and we're simply going to select our drag start, because we need to tell it, all right, where are we going to start the dragging effect? And equaling that to our get underscore global mouse position. So wherever our mouse is on the game, using that global position, because we can use that global position anywhere. All right, awesome. Now, of course, what if it has something in there? Then we're going to do our else. All right, so if it's anything except 0, then we're going to go ahead and start off with a for loop. So for item in our selected, so it's going to loop through everything we have in that array. And if we go ahead, starting it off with another if, so if our string of the array, which is going to be our item dot collider, so anything basically inside of this is going to be inside the item dot collider. So any of our units, we want to make sure one thing real quick, which is going to be if it doesn't equal something called, make sure you have your greater than or less than symbols. This is just a little error I found sometimes that will do this in case the item gets deleted. So we have to make sure the item is not deleted. So a freed object, because anytime you are selecting something and then trying to locate it after it gets deleted, even if it's selected, it's going to give you this freed object ID, which we do not want. Because of course, if we're highlighting certain workers or units and they are getting defeated before we tell them to do something, we don't want them to do anything. We just want them to kind of go away. So make sure you have that in there, which is just a little check. All right, freed object, make sure you have the greater than or less than symbols in there. Then we're going to go ahead and set our item dot collider dot target. All right, dot target is a variable we are going to select inside of all of our units and workers. All right, that's going to basically tell it, hey, I want to go to that target. So we need to tell them exactly where they got to go by using the dot target and then equaling it to, of course, that get underscore global mouse position. All right, so basically, if you guessed it, we are basically selecting our units. They're being highlighted and set to selected, and then we click somewhere else and that tells them where to go. All right, awesome. And that's how pretty much the movement is going to work. But there's some other stuff we need to set though, such as again, item dot collider. Make sure you're spelling collider right or it's going to give you some errors. Dot turn underscore off underscore all underscore jobs. Now, turn off all jobs is also a function we are going to create inside the unit and the worker. This basically is going to tell them, hey, stop what you're doing and go to, of course, that mouse position that we clicked on. Because sometimes our units and even our workers are going to be doing other things. They might be collecting wood, gold, building something, or even attacking somebody. So we got to make sure to tell them, hey, don't do that anymore and continue to go to the global mouse position. All right. So that's why we need that there. All right. Awesome. Next up, we're also going to set our item.collider again. And this is going to be dot selected, all right? And then we're going to equal this to false. Now selected is going to be a variable inside of our workers and vils. Our workers, I sometimes call our workers vils, but workers and units, anytime they're selected, of course, they're going to be inside if they have this array, so they're going to be inside this array, but they're also going to be basically highlighting, and we don't really want them selected anymore once we tell them to go somewhere. We only want to select a couple and then tell them to go somewhere, and then be able to select some new ones. So we always have to make sure to turn that off once we tell them to go do something. That can be anything from a job or even just moving their position, all right? So that's why we're doing that there, okay? Perfect. So now once we do all this, we need to empty our array. So we're going to go ahead, do an enter, and go backspace. In a backspace, this should be the same line as our for loop. To empty the array, we're just going to set our selected, equaling it to just a bracket set, which makes it equal nothing anymore, all right? Just like how it was back at the beginning. Perfect. All right, so now, of course, we need an elif. And this elif is going to basically be if we are dragging, all right? So let's go ahead and do that. This is kind of how it's going to work with telling them where to go and selecting the box and all that fun stuff, all right? This is going to be a pretty big one, so just do elif on this line. And then we're going to do dragging equals true. And then inside of it, we're going to set a couple things. All right. So let's go ahead. So if dragging equals true, so we are currently like initiating a new selecting and the box is being created. To do that, we're going to go ahead. First off, we are going to set dragging to false, so it only does this once. Just like that. We're also going to go ahead and queue redraw. We're going to go ahead after that, and we're going to create a new variable, and we're going to call this drag underscore end, which if you guessed it is going to be the endpoint of where we're dragging. And to get that, we're going to do a get underscore global mouse position. All right, because we start clicking it to create it, and then basically we are moving it and then deselecting it. All right, so we need a new variable for that, which is going to be called drag end. I'm going to make a couple enters so we can see this a little better. I could also close this debugger down here. All right, so on this line, after we created drag end, we're going to go ahead and do our select rect dot extents extents. We're going to equal that to abs, give it a set of parentheses, and then we're going to do drag end minus drag end, and then divide the whole thing by 2. All right, and this is again just helping us create our rectangle box we are creating. We're also going to create a new variable under that and call it space, and we're going to make this equal to get underscore world 2D, and then after the parentheses set, we're going to do a dot direct space state, and then we're going to go ahead, create another variable, call this q, make this equal our physics shape query parameters 2D. Make sure it's the 2D one, not the 3D one. All right. Then we're going to go ahead and set our q dot shape. We're going to go ahead and make that equal our selected rect. There we go. Then we're going to go ahead and set our q dot collision mask underscore mask, which basically just sets, all right, where can we actually select these things? And we're going to do layer 2. So all of our units and our workers are going to be on that layer 2. Make sure you do that once we create our workers and our units. We're also going to set our q dot transform. And we're going to equal that to capital T transform 2D. Inside of it, set of parentheses. We're going to go ahead, do a 0, comma, set of parentheses, drag end, minus, drag start. It looks like I just caught something. We actually forgot to put one over here. We shouldn't have done drag end minus drag end. This is also going to be drag end minus drag start. So make sure you have that there, or it's going to give you an error. Drag end minus drag start. But going back over here, once we have this over here, we're going to do the same calculation. We're just going to divide the whole thing by 2. All right. And again, all these light blue things, we have to make sure they're spelled correctly or they're going to give us an error. So direct space state for this one, shape for this one, collision mask for this one, and then we have transform for this one. All right. Awesome. Then we're going to go ahead and set our selected equal to space dot intersect shape. There we go. And inside of there, we're going to use that q that we just created. Perfect. Then we're going to have a simple for loop and do for item in selected. We're simply going to go ahead and set our item dot collision shape, or sorry, just collider. Collider. And it looks like I noticed another issue up here. Make sure you spell everything correctly or it's going to give you errors down the road. Collider dot selected. Awesome. Equal that to true. All right, perfect. Awesome. All right. Now you can step out of that for loop and you can also go ahead and step out of that entire elif. So you're going to be on the same line. Perfect. Or actually not even the same line. You're going to be completely out of there. So we're going to be basically on the same line as our if event. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do if event again is input event mouse motion, wherever that is, input event. Should just pop up about mouse motion. There it is down there. We're going to go ahead and do an and dragging. This is what's going to basically update the size. And we're going to go inside of it and simply do a Q redraw. All right, perfect. Awesome. All right, make sure you got that down. Remember, you can always check the source code if you get confused. But looking good, looking good. Now we have two small other functions to do. So outside of the current function we're in, we're going to go ahead and create a function underscore draw. If you guessed it, this is going to be the actual drawing effect. And to do it simply, we're going to do if dragging equals true. And then if it does, we're simply going to do a draw rect. There we go. And this is going to actually create that. So let's go ahead and do a rect2. Give it a set of parentheses. Drag start, comma, get underscore global mouse position. And we're going to minus that. Make sure you're still inside of it though. You're going to minus it by drag start. There we go. And then we're going to do a comma outside of it. And I'm going to do a capital C color, which will set the color of it. And I'm going to go ahead and do a color of dot capital white. You can make it whatever color you want. I just think this is the easiest one to test. And then we're going to do a comma. We're going to do a false for our bool. Whoopsie. And then the size of it, which is going to be like the width. So we're going to do a 4.0. And again, you can adjust that if you want to. That's completely up to you. But there we go. Awesome. That's going to be our draw function. Perfect. Now we just need a simple process function. So let's go ahead, do a simple function down here, underscore process. And then inside of this is just a simple one that we're going to do if global dot worker is selected equals false. Then what we want to do is we want to simply set our selected to empty as well. And this is just a safety net. I noticed it will have glitches sometimes if we don't do this. So just make sure you have this here just in case, all right? Perfect. I'm going to get rid of these extra spaces. We don't need those. Let's keep things nice and clean. There we go. Perfect. Awesome. Remember, you can always check the source code, but looking good so far. Awesome. All right, let's test things out. Let's go ahead and select the play button. And we should be able to create a rectangle on the screen. So if I go ahead and highlight over like that, oops, look like we get an error. Invalid assignment of property or key shape with value of type rectangle shape 2D on the base object of type physics shape query parameters 2D. Oh, I know what we did. We forgot to do a .new on our line 27 where we are creating that Q variable. Make sure you do a .new because we are creating a new shape with that. All right, perfect. So make sure you have .new there and we should be good. Let's go ahead and turn off the game. There we go. I'm going to close the debugger again. Save what you got. Hit play. And we shouldn't get an error anymore. So if I go ahead and move the screen around, start selecting, and there we go. Awesome. Looks perfect. There we go. All right. Don't forget to save. Let's go back to the 2D view. Close the debugger. And looking good so far. Awesome. All right. In this section, we're going to go ahead and create the map node. We're going to start off creating a new tile map layer node for the map. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the sprites for the ground. Last but not least, we're going to ensure they all have a navigation on each tile. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started creating the game's map. So let's go ahead and create a new node for this. This is going to be inside of our game objects. So we're going to right click, add child node, and we are going to add a tile map layer. Now make sure it's not just the regular tile map. That's the old one. The new one is called tile map layer. Okay, so select that, go to create, and perfect. All right, now make sure though it is inside of game objects. I thought I was putting it inside there. Don't know why it didn't go in there, but there we go. You might have to drag and drop it if it doesn't go in there, but there you go. All right, so tile map layer, we'll keep it as that name. We're going to add a couple things to it though. Make sure you're selecting it. Go to the inspector. It's going to ask for a tile set, so let's go ahead and add a new one, new tile set. Perfect. All right, go ahead and select it again, and you should get a drop down. So there's going to be a couple things in here. We are going to want to add a physics layer. So let's go ahead and add that. Perfect. We're also going to add a navigation layer. All right. This is what's going to basically be all the areas that our units and workers can go on top of and basically go all the way around. How we're going to basically do this is we are going to have spots with navigation layers and then spots without. So anything we can't go through and we want our units and workers to go around, such as the trees, golds, or even some buildings, we don't want them to have this, but we do want the things we do want to be walk aroundable to have that layer. And you'll see how we do that in a bit. All right, awesome. So make sure you have that there. Next thing we want to do is we want to make this a little bigger. So we're going to go to the transform, and the current scale is just at 1 for X and Y. We're actually going to change this to 2.4. I find that it works a little bit better. All right, awesome. So now that we have that set and everything else set, we're also going to go ahead, go to the tile set on the bottom, and then we simply just drag and drop in our tile set. So inside of our Sci-Fi RTS, scroll all the way down, and you should get the tile sheet. Go ahead and drag and drop this one here. It's going to be sci-fi_tilesheet.png. Just drag it in here. It'll ask you if it wants to slice it for you. Go ahead and select yes, and there we go. So we're actually going to have two. We're going to have one for the nav spot and one for the no nav spot. All right, so we can rename this one. We're going to call this one nav spot. Perfect. And then we're going to need the other one, which is going to be called no nav spot. And to do that, simply just drag and drop it again, just like we did. Select yes. Perfect. Go ahead and give this one a name as well. I'm going to call it no_nav_spot. All right, just like that. Perfect. All right, so we're going to be working with the nav spot first. So select that one. We're going to go to paint. Go ahead and just move this up a little bit. Let's go ahead and just find a couple areas here. I want to go ahead and just select one of these. You might have to drop this down first. Go ahead to the navigation layer. And now you can go ahead and add some navigation spots. And basically all the navigation spots I want to do is going to be the first 4 across and then the 4 down and everything in between. All right. So go ahead, start selecting them all, and they should turn a different color. Just like that. Perfect. Make sure all of them are selected. Awesome. All right. So that's going to be it for our nav spot. We can leave the no nav spot by itself because if you select this one, there's no longer going to be any here, and that's exactly what we want. We only want the nav spot to have the navigation layers. All right. Awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and select the tile map now. Let's zoom out a little bit because now we have to create the actual, basically the map. And I'm going to go ahead, scroll this down a little bit as well. I'm just going to make a pretty big square. We already know that because we are moving around with the camera, it's going to stop us eventually. So I'm just going to make it big enough where it basically is going to be like this big. So we might have some areas we can go beyond. If you wanted to make it like pixel perfect and cut it off exactly where the camera stops, you can do that if you want. But to save time, I'm just going to make the whole thing big. So let's go ahead and select all the blocks we want. Make sure you're selecting the nav spot. So go ahead and select the top 4 and then all the way down 4, just like that. Perfect. Select the little picker tool as well. And then go ahead and just select the top corner above, something like this. It might take a second or two to load because it takes a while with the navigation spots. There we go. And we're just going to make a big square, just like that. All right, perfect. Let that load. Might take a second or two because it's adding all those navigation spots. All right, go ahead and save that real quick. All right, one thing we can do just to double check some stuff is we can go ahead and go to the debug and select visible navigation. Now it might already be selected, it might not, but make sure that is selected so we can see it when we turn on the game. All right. You could also select visible paths as well so we can see the paths too, which we will do later on. But let's go ahead and hit play and you'll see what I'm talking about. There we go. See all these spots? These are navigation spots. So if we turned that off in the debugger, we wouldn't see those. Now if we go ahead and go all the way up, let's just make sure we don't see any of the empty, which is good. I only see this. Perfect. Let's go all the way to the right and just double check it. Yep, good on that side. Let's check the left. I just want to make sure that we made the map big enough. All right. Let's keep it going. Looks like we're good over there. And now let's finally check the bottom. And then I think we should be good. Keep it going. There we go. Perfect. Awesome. That looks great. And the last thing to check is just go ahead, select the tile map layer. And what we want to make sure is that the position is still at x0 and position for y is at 0 as well. All right, perfect. Things are looking good. I'm going to go ahead and select somewhere else, save what you got, and there you go. All right, in this section, we're going to create the map script. We're going to start off creating a new map script and attaching it to our map node. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the variables that we will be using. Then we're going to go ahead and create some code that will handle all the removing and adding of navigation spots on the map. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and begin creating this script. So let's go ahead and select our tile map layer. We're going to go ahead and add a script to it. You can leave the name as tile_map_layer.gd. Perfect. All right. So this script isn't going to have anything inside of the ready or as a variable. It's going to be entirely inside of the process function. All right. So I'm going to get rid of all that. So how are we going to be doing this? We are going to be passing in values into our array that we created in our global script, if you remember, in the either add nav spot or add no nav spot. And then if anything is inside of these, we are going to basically either take away a tile or add a tile. All right. Well, we're actually going to be taking away a tile and adding a tile for every single one. And how we are going to do that is going to be based on pretty much the ID of the specific tile set we have. So if you go ahead and go to tile set down here and select either one of these and go to setup, you're going to see that they have an ID of either 0 for the first one or 1 for the second one. All right. So basically we are going to be saying, hey, I want to add a tile, so I'm going to set whatever tile we're at for the x and y value to either 1 or 0. All right. If we're adding a tile with navigation, we are going to set the ID of 0. If we are taking away 1, then we are going to set it to the ID of 1. Because if you remember the nav spot, if you go to paint, these ones are all navigation ones. But if you go to the no nav spot, they're going to be all nothing. So again, the nav spot one is going to be the ID of 0. And the no nav is going to be the ID of 1. All right. And this is all going to be done in the process function of our script. So let's go ahead and begin with an if statement of capital G global dot add nav spot. If it doesn't equal null, so exclamation point equals sign null. So basically, if it has something inside of it, we want to do something. We want to set a for loop called spots in our global dot add nav spot. So if anything is inside of that add nav spot, we're going to go ahead and we are going to erase a cell of a vector 2. And inside of that vector 2, we're going to add the spots of dot x, comma, spots of dot y. All right, awesome. And then we're simply going to go ahead and have that. So when we are creating things inside of our map, all right, we are going to make everything equal basically 4 spots. So it's going to be sections of 4. So you can see it a little better over here where everything we have is going to be a section of 4. So like a house will be a section of 4, a range will be a section of 4, a tower, everything is going to be 4 of these, okay? So because we are doing 4 at a time in our script, we're not just going to be able to do just simply our first .x and .y spot. We have to also do all the other ones. So that .x and .y is only going to do like this one, but we need to do it for each one around it as well. And there's a simple way we can do that, simply by copying the entire array cell we made, and go ahead now and just add a +1 to the x in this one, and then go ahead, copy it again. This time we're going to go ahead now and do a +1 for the y, so let's take away that +1 there, and do a +1 for the y. And then if you guessed it, we're going to go ahead and do a plus for each one now. All right. And this again is because we are not only changing the first one, but we want to change the one next to it, the one below it, and the one next to it and below it. Okay. So we can get that 4 value. All right. Perfect. So make sure you have that. So that's going to be for the erasing cell. Now, because we are adding a nav spot, we also need to set the cell. So similar to how we did the erase cell, I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to add a space below it. Instead of erase cell this time, we are going to do set cell, which is going to set the cell. So we are first erasing the cell, and then we are going to set the cell. And we are pretty much going to do the same thing. We just have to add a couple more parameters in. We're telling it the same spots, but we also tell it which type. And if you remember, I mentioned the IDs. So we have to set it to whichever ID, okay? So if we are adding a navigation spot, we're going to go ahead and add the nav spot, which again is going to be 0. So we're going to do a 0 here, telling it, hey, we want to add the ID of 0. And then we need to tell it, okay, where are you going to add it? We're going to do a comma, and then we're going to do a vector 2, I, and a 0, comma 0. Now this 0, comma 0 is not these spots. This is the spot still. That's still the same. But we're basically telling it, hey, we want to use this nav spot tile sheet, and we want to set this one here. Because if you remember, if we go to paint, this one is a navigation. Now, if you wanted it to be a little more complicated and use the exact same ones, you could do that. But I'm just going to set all of them to this one here because we're really only going to see the dirt patch anyway. Now, the tile might be off a little bit, but I think it blends pretty well either way. So we're just going to set it to this one. If you wanted to set it to something like the ice one, you could do that here. That really just depends on what you want to do. All right. But I'm just going to keep things simple and always set it to 0, comma 0. All right. So I'm going to go back to setup there. So now we have that for the nav spot. Now again, we need to do this for each one. So let's go ahead and just copy it, paste it in. And if you remember, we need to do a plus for the X, copy the whole thing. We need to do one with a plus for the Y. So let's go ahead, go to the Y, to a plus for the Y, and then we need a double plus for each now. Okay, awesome. Go ahead, add a plus for this one as well. Perfect, awesome. So the last thing we need to do, and this is going to be outside of our for loop, because now we have set everything correctly, we don't want this to just keep happening over and over again. So a way we can prevent that is simply doing a global dot add nav spot dot clear. So that will clear the current array we have. And because this thing is going so fast, even if we have things deleting right after each other, it should be able to process pretty quickly where we won't have any overlap. All right, just make sure this is also in the same line as the for loop, but not inside of it. Okay, perfect. So this is going to be working for the add nav spot. All right, now we need one for the removing one, which is going to be pretty easy. We can just copy the whole thing starting from the if global.navSpot does not equal null. We're going to copy that and just go right below. I'm going to add a space to make things spaced out a little better. And if you guessed it, we're simply going to set our original if up here. Instead of add nav spot, we're going to go ahead and do add to no nav spots. We need to change all of those to add to no nav spots. Don't forget to change it there, and also over here as well. Perfect. And the only thing left to change is now the ID of the set cells, okay? Because everything in the erase cell is going to be the same. Pretty much the same thing for set cells. Of course, the ID is the only thing we have to change because our no nav spots over here is ID of 1, all right? So let's change all these zeros here to 1. Let's do this one as well. And then this one as well. And then this one as well. Perfect. Awesome. Let's save that. Awesome. Perfect. Looking good. Let's go ahead, go back to 2D view. We can select outside of that. And there we go. To properly test this out, we would need an actual building to place, but there is a way we can kind of demo it real quick. So if we go ahead and select into our script for our global, which just go over here, we could go inside of the ready function and simply go ahead and call the variable, which again is going to be add to no nav spot. Then we do a dot append, and then we simply give it a vector 2. And so it's visible right on start. We could do something like a value of 5 for x, and then also another value of 5 for y, just so it'll be kind of in the middle. We save that. We go ahead, hit play, and then we should see a section taken away, which is just like that. Perfect. So we are basically going to be passing in these vector 2s, which are going to take away different spots depending on when we have things placed, such as the trees, the gold, or even some buildings. All right, so let's close that. Let's get rid of that code we just added. Save that change. Go back to 2D view. Select somewhere else. Close the debugger. And there we go. Looking good. All right, in this section, we're going to create the worker node. We're going to start off creating a new node for the worker. Then we're going to go ahead and add all the sprites, collision areas, navigation agents, and timers. We're also going to go ahead and create a simple animation for when they are working a job. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the worker node. So first thing we're going to do inside of our game objects node, we're going to right click. We're going to add a child node, and we're going to make a character node, character body 2D specifically. Let's go ahead and add that. All right, so first thing we should do is just move it somewhere in the middle a little bit so we can see it a little better. Awesome. All right, we're going to go ahead and rename it. Let's just call this worker. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead, right click on it, add child node, and we're going to add a node 2D first. We're going to call this body. Perfect. All right. In body, we're going to add two things. We're going to add the actual sprite of the image, and then we're also going to add like a highlighting image for the background. All right. So let's go ahead and add the original one first. So right click, add child node, sprite 2D. All right. Let's drag and drop the sprite we're going to use. You can use whichever one you want, but I think I like one of them specifically. This is not going to be in the environment or structure. It's actually going to be in the entire different one we haven't used yet, the Kenny Space Shooter one. Let's go ahead, go to PNG, and scroll down a little bit. And the one I want to use is, I think it's going to be this one here, this blue one. It's going to be player ship 2 _ blue.png. Take that, drag and drop it onto our sprite 2D. Perfect. All right. Now it's a little big, so let's go ahead and shrink it a bit. Let's go ahead, go to transform. Let's try 0.5 and see how that looks. Maybe still a little bit too big. Let's try 0.4. Perfect. Awesome. You can make it smaller or bigger too. That's up to you. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to rotate it. So we're going to go to the rotation. We're going to set this to 90, and this is all still inside the sprite 2D. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so now we need the background highlighted one. So let's go ahead, and we're just going to duplicate this. Control D. And let's just call this back. Call this back sprite. Perfect. We also have to move it behind the sprite 2D. So go ahead, take that, put it right there. Perfect. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, right click, add child node, and we're going to add a color rect. And we're going to stretch this out just so it covers it entirely. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure it is covering everything with a little bit behind it as well, just like that. All right. Awesome. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to select the back sprite. We're going to go to visibility, and we're going to go ahead and select this clip children from disabled to clip and draw. And then simply go ahead, select it again, go to transform, and just make this a little bigger. So instead of 0.4, let's do like 0.6. And we might need to adjust it. So simply go ahead and do something like that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see it better. There we go. Maybe we go a little bit smaller. That's still a little big. Let's do like 0.55. Perfect. And also what I want to do is I want to make this color of the color rect. Select that. And just change that to like a blue. All right. Maybe a little darker. Perfect. And you can make that whatever color you want. I just think it kind of makes it look nice. So this back sprite is basically going to be selected on the unit and visible when we have the workers selected. All right, so when we highlight over things and select them, we are going to know which exactly ones we have control of when they have this little highlighter. Okay, awesome. All right, let's go ahead, close that up, close the body up. Now that we know it's here, there is a couple settings we need to set on the actual worker itself. So select that. the motion mode. This is not a grounded type. This is a floating type, technically. We're also going to go ahead and set the collision. Instead of 0.08, we're going to set that to 5, okay? Awesome. That's going to help the collision a little bit. Let me double check and make sure I'm not missing any other settings. I think that should be good. What we do need, though, is to go inside the collision itself. And if you remember, inside our script in the game objects, we said that we want to be able to select things that are inside the layer 2. So make sure the layer 2 is selected and the mask layer 2 is selected as well, or you're not going to be able to select these types of workers, okay? Awesome. So make sure you have that there. Perfect. And I think we should be looking good. All right. One more thing you could do, actually, it's kind of a preference thing, is set the ordering. I like to make this above most of the other sprites. So let's go ahead and let's simply make this something like 30. All right. Just so we know exactly that it's on top of everything. And remember, this is still the worker node. All right. And if we hit play, we should be able to still see that this is above the ground. Okay. So go ahead, hit play. Let that load. There it is. And we should be able to make a box. If you aren't seeing the box, that might be because the background of the tile map layer is too high. We can simply fix that by selecting it. Go on down to ordering, and we have it at 0. Let's just make this -1, okay? And if we hit play again, we should see the box now. And there we go. Everything looks pretty good. Awesome. All right, let's continue. So now we need to go ahead and add our collision shape. That's why we're getting this little warning here. So let's select the worker, right click, add child node, collision shape. Perfect. We need to add the shape, which I'm going to do a circle. And this isn't going to be the area shape. So this one's not really going to go into effect when we are moving around and bumping into things. We only want this one to give it like the actual hard body of this, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just make this a little bigger. I don't want it entirely bigger, but something about that should be good, okay? Maybe we could even move it back a little bit if you want it centered a little better. That's up to you. But I think something like this should be perfect. All right, awesome. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select worker again. Right click, add child node, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to add an area 2D. Now this is going to be the actual body that it can get hit by things, okay? So this one here, let's go ahead, make sure you're selecting it. We're going to go ahead, right click, add child node on there. We also have to give this a collision shape so we can get rid of that little error. Then let's give this a shape. I'm going to do a circle again, and I'm simply going to make this one a little bigger because this should be surrounding the entire ship. Something like that should be good. And again, we can move it back a little bit so it's centered a little better. Just like that. Perfect. All right, awesome. All right, looking good. I like it. Eventually we'll attach a signal to that, but we can keep it like this for now. All right, so we need another area 2D now. So right click. Again, we're going to need an area 2D. And this is going to be the actual tools of the worker. Okay, so let's go ahead and call this area 2D, capital T, tools. Perfect. And this one here can be a lot smaller. So let's go ahead, add child node, collision shape, 2D. Perfect. Let's go ahead, set the shape to circle. And this one doesn't need to be as big as the other one. I think for now we can just keep it pretty small, even smaller than the other one. I am though going to back it up so it's centered up with everything else. Whoopsie, make sure you have it like that. Let me double check. Looks like we're a little, I keep on accidentally selecting that thing. It won't let me do that, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. As long as it's kind of in the middle and it's preferably smaller than the one of the body. Okay, so like that. All right, perfect. And you'll see why we're doing this, because basically how this is going to work, once we start the job and we're next to it, this one's going to grow. So even if we're right next to it, like standing like side by side, as long as we make this one smaller than the outer shell of the body one, it will initiate the hitting of it, okay? So as long as it's smaller than the outer one, you should be good. So keep that there, perfect. We're also going to add a specific grouping to that one. Let me double check the name, which if you go ahead and select the area 2D tools, go to the node, go to groups, and then this little plus button here. Let's go ahead and add worker underscore tools. All right, awesome. Go ahead, enter that, make it selected. Now, like I said before, this one's only going to be doing its thing basically when we are working, and we're not going to be always working a job. So let's go ahead and turn this off for now, just like that. Perfect. And we might also go ahead and disable the collision shape as well. To do that, just select the collision shape 2D, go back to the inspector, and just select the disabled to on, okay? It's not going to be inside the area 2D tools, it's going to be inside the collision shape. But make sure that's selected. We will change that up with the animation though once we get started with that. But let's continue though, we still have a couple more things to do in here. Let's right click on worker, add child node. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a progress bar. This is going to be the health of the unit. So let's go ahead and turn off the show percentage, we don't need that. Let's give the max value a 10 for now. And then let's give the current value, which is right here, also a 10. We're also going to give it a style. So if you go down to the theme overrides and go down to styles, you should see a background and also a fill. Let's select the background first, select new style box flat, select that again, and then select the BG color. We're just going to make this black. Let's scroll down. Let's do for the fill, select the empty, another new style box flat, select it again, select BG color, and we're going to make this green. I'm just going to make it kind of a nice green like this. You can make it whatever green you want, but I think that looks pretty good. All right, perfect. Next thing we're going to do is put this right above the sprite. So let's go ahead and just simply move it over. It doesn't need to be perfect. Let's go ahead, do something like that, and then something like this. Awesome, pretty much centered. And then I'm going to make it go above a little bit. And I don't want it too thick, so I'm going to make it a little thinner, something like that. Awesome. Perfect. So this is going to be kind of like the health bar of the unit. All right, perfect. All right, next up, right click on worker, add child node. We're going to make a navigation agent now, which should be somewhere around here. Navigation agent, there it is. Navigation agent 2D, create. This is going to be the actual controller for navigating. You'll see how it works once we get into the code, but it's pretty simple. So let's go ahead and add all the settings we need for this. I'm going to select the navigation agent. I'm going to go to node, open up pathfinding, the first one. And these are some settings I found to be pretty good. You can always adjust these later if you want, but I think it's pretty good for a 25 for this top one, path desired distance. And then go ahead and change the path max distance from 100 to 10. Just makes things center up a little better. We're also going to go ahead and we're going to make this path post process instead of this one, we're going to make it edge centered. This just kind of makes it centered inside of each tile, which I kind of like a lot. We're also going to select simplify path. And then I think we can keep everything else the same there. But we are going to go ahead and select our avoidance and turn that on. We don't need to change anything here. This just helps us add avoidance for when we have other navigation agents running into each other, so they don't just like kind of climb all over each other, which makes it kind of look bad. We're also going to go ahead and we're going to select our debug and turn that on so we can see exactly where these paths are going to be. Okay, awesome. And I think we're looking good on that. So that's going to be all the settings we need for the navigation agent 2D. All right, awesome. All right, now we're going to need a couple timers. So let's go ahead on worker, add child node. Again, we're going to create timer. Perfect. I'm going to select my timer over here. All right, so this timer is going to be for the timer still too long. So basically, this is going to be the one that is going to say, hey, this worker is working, like his job is active, but he's standing still too long because something is wrong. Like maybe his new thing he was doing, like the gold mine he was using, is gone. So this will basically kind of refresh him and be like, oh, okay, go find another one now. So it's really handy to kind of have this to keep the game flowing and just kind of nice overall. So let's make that wait time instead of 1, let's make it 2. Again, you can always adjust that later, but this is going to be a one shot, so make sure that's selected. Perfect. All right, we're going to have another timer as well. This is going to be timer, and we're going to call this timer shoot. All right, and this is going to be the timer in between shots when we're shooting the laser. Perfect. And let me double check what we need for that one. This one is going to be a also wait time of 2, and it's also going to be a one shot as well. All right, perfect. All right, there we go. Looking good so far. I like it. Now let's go ahead, and while we're here, let's select the worker. Let's right click on it, and let's go to the save branch as scene. This will kind of give it its own scene. Select save. Perfect. To open up the scene, let's select that little box there, and there we go. So we do need to center it up here because it's not exactly in the correct position. So let's select worker. Let's go to transform, and just makes that position of X and Y equals 0 for each one. Just like that. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Everything looks pretty good so far. The last thing we need to add is simply the animation player. So let's go ahead, right click on worker, add child node, and we're going to add the animation player now. And all we're going to be making is one simple animation that's going to be active when the worker is working a job. Okay? So when they're right next to something that they have to do, like building a building, chopping down a tree, or mining a gold mine, this animation is going to play. And it's basically just going to turn on that Area 2D tools and make sure it hits the things next to it. All right. So let me double check my work over here to make sure I know exactly what we need to do. We might adjust this later because this is a little finicky. So let's go ahead and select the animation player. And let me see what I named it over here. Okay. We're going to go ahead, select animation, new, and we're going to call this use_tools. All right. Perfect. And this is going to be a pretty fast animation. It's not going to be too long. I think I only made it originally like a second, so we can just keep it at a second, which is right over here. But we are going to go ahead and we're going to start here at the beginning. And what we're going to do is we're going to select our Area 2D. We are going to make this visible, so go to visibility. You can key value this on like that, just like that, hit create, perfect. So it turns it on at the beginning, awesome. We're also going to go ahead, open it up, select our collision shape, and we need to turn off that disabled, and then select that, perfect, hit create. And then all we have to do is simply just grow that collision shape at the 0.5, something like this, or even, you know what, we can even make it a little bigger, faster, but I think 0.5 could be okay. So let's select collision shape, and we're going to go ahead to the transform, and what we're going to do is at the beginning, we're going to save the scale, just like that, at 1, but once we go to 0.5, we're going to go ahead and increase this. Let's see what 2 looks like. We might need to do more. Yep, just a little more, like 2.5. There we go, maybe 6 just to be a little bigger. We might adjust this, remember. So 2.6, we save it at that, perfect. Let's go ahead, make sure you key value that. You should see the little dot for it. Awesome, and then once you get to the end over here at 1, we're gonna go ahead and just turn everything off, okay? So we're gonna go ahead, shrink this back to 1, or actually we can just keep it here. It's fine to keep it at 2.6. We can go ahead though and just turn it off by going to the collision shape, selecting the key next to disabled when it's turned on, just like that, perfect. So we turn that back on. We're also gonna make it invisible. So again, hit that button there, key shape, perfect. All right, awesome. The other thing we could do just to make sure we know it's actually going into effect is we could just grow the body a little bit. So once we get to 0.5, let's go ahead, select body. Let's go to the transform. And I'm just gonna make this a little bigger. Let's just do, well, first, before we do that, we always gotta make sure to start it at the starting point. I always forget to do that. So scale needs to save at 1, just like that, hit create. Then again, go back to go to 0.5. Let's do 0.1, that might be a little too big, but let's see. Make sure it's for both of them. Let's save that. Let's go ahead and bring it back to 1. Make sure to have it 1 for each. And then there we go. So, okay, it just grows a little bit just like that. If you wanted to make it a little bigger, you could. I actually think 0.2 might look a little better, so we might just do that instead. There we go. Just like that, and save that, perfect. Awesome. All right, so there we go. That's gonna be our using tool animation. It's gonna be just like that, okay? We might have to change some things down the road in case we have some bugs, but I think it'll work pretty well. Now the next thing to double check before we move on is gonna be the reset. Make sure that when we are in the reset one, that all these things are turned off, because I don't think they are. If we have this disabled, that is turned off, that is good. The scaling is back to normal, good. The body should be back to normal. We just got to make sure this isn't visible though, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select Area 2D Tools. I'm going to turn that off, select that. I'm also going to double check the collision shape. It's not disabled, so go ahead and select that and key it on as well. Perfect. All right, because that'll cause a lot of problems if this thing is left on, okay? So we always going to make sure that the Area 2D Tools is not visible and that it is set to disabled for collision shape 2D inside of it. All right, awesome. And then of course we got to make sure the scale is the same, which looks like it is. All right, perfect. Looking good so far. Awesome. Let's go back over here. Let's save those changes. Perfect. I'm going to select animation so that goes away. You might have also noticed if you go back to the main scene that once you save, because we adjust the position, if you zoom out, it's going to be back in the corner. So just because, I'm going to move it back towards the middle. Perfect. Let's go back to worker. Once we save that, awesome, and looking good. I really hope you're enjoying this course, but if you would like to continue it, you will have to become a student at Red Fools Academy. On first sign up, you will get a free 7 days back guarantee. Once a member, you will have full access to not only this course, but all of our courses in game, app, and website development. On top of that, you will get full support from the Red Fools Studio team. A link will be attached to the description, and you can also use this URL as seen below. See you in the lectures!